Damn, when they said the next patch would be nerf focused, they weren't kidding. There's only one buff here, and it's because of a bug fix. So today, patch 9.0 is dropped, with a slight bit of copium theory for third kits, some nerfs to the best weapons in the game, and a huge fix to the game's netcode. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoy, and let's break it down. First off, the netcode change. In situations where you deal damage or defeat opponents, there is a delay reduction of approximately 3 frames. Basically, anytime you're dealing damage to the enemy, there is a bit of a delay to account for latency or the game's tick rate. This delay is now 3 frames shorter, which is just a good change. I feel like I don't even really have to explain why. So let's get into the nerfs. The main nerf of this patch is Squeezer. There are 2 changes listed here, but it's technically 3. First off, they slowed the speed of the first shot fired after pressing the ZR button by approximately 5%. Now, to clarify, the first shot is basically just the tap shot mode, since you always have to press ZR once before you go into painting mode. This firing mode is going to have a slightly slower shot velocity, very slightly. However, this will also affect its range, meaning Squeezer is going to have 5% less range total. This weapon currently has a bit of a range advantage over pretty much every other midline in the game right now, and while its range should still be fairly high, it will now be much closer to other weapons, increasing the amount of time someone will be able to shoot back at it. In addition to that, the movement speed of the weapon is also slowed by approximately 8%, meaning the weapon will be strafing slightly slower and have a bit harder of a time trying to space away from opponents. The devs' notes directly stated that they wanted Squeezer to be something that's difficult to master but can produce some high performance. However, since they could reach from a high distance with high movement speed, it was very easy to get a lot of attempts to shoot opponents, and that made up for the difficulty of the weapon, so that's why they're reducing the performance. I think this is a really good change. Squeezer was oppressive in a lot of matchups, and being both easier to hit and closer to what it's going to fight is going to make the interactions feel a lot more back and forth. Next up on the nerfs is the Range Blaster. This is getting a blast radius explosion reduction of approximately 6%. And if this looks familiar, this is because this is the same nerf that happened to Blaster and the Rapid Blasters back in Splatoon 2. In addition to that, in Splatoon 3, they buffed the Range Blaster's paint output at the point of impact with a wall or floor by 15% in a previous patch. This is now being toned back by approximately 9%, meaning that original buff is going to barely be noticeable now. Range Blaster has, for a while, been the strongest AoE weapon in the entire game, so this change isn't really too surprising, and I think reducing the blast radius, like with Squeezer, reduces the most annoying part about fighting the weapon, which is a good change in my opinion. Next up is Slosher. This is getting an ink consumption change of approximately 9%, which will likely change the weapon from 14 to 13 sloshes on a full ink tank, and will make it so that you only get 3 sloshes after using a bomb. Honestly, it really just means sloshes are probably going to be using 1 sub of Ink Saver main to help mitigate this change. A little bit more gear dependency, a little bit less uptime, and a little bit less strike output. Not too much here. The Heavy Edit Spiraling and Pencil are both getting the same change. A slight painting reduction. For Pencil, this will be the width of the shots being slightly less wide, and for Heavy Edit Spiraling, it's the amount of spray droplets generated. Both of these weapons will be painting slightly less, and getting slightly less Tacticooler, which should put them much more closely in line with Zap as cooler options. This very clearly seems to be geared toward lowering cooler output overall, and making it more even between all the different options in the game. Is this going to be enough though? I'm not quite sure. I think that Pencil still has oppressive matchups over a lot of the other anchors, and with the lack of buffs to any of them or their specials in this patch, I think that it might still be picked over them. However, I do think Pencil comps will feel like they get cooler a bit less, meaning it is a bit easier to try to push up and close the gap against the Pencil user, which, like I've been saying for a few of these changes, reduces arguably the most annoying attribute about fighting this comp. Finally is the Well String of all things. They decreased its paint radius by about 8%. Oh no, a little bit less wave breakers, I guess. I don't know, they didn't really need to do this, but Wellstring did paint a lot, so okay, why not? On to the specials. Trizuka is getting a startup nerf finally, but it's only by 5 frames. Nowhere near the nerf amount that happened in Splatoon 1. I mean, I'll still take it. 5 more frames is 5 more frames, but they could have done a little bit more. At the very least, it tweaks the most annoying part about fighting the weapon, but they could have definitely done more. Points for special are really brief. Custom Range Blaster and Vanilla Slosher are both 10 more expensive. Paired with the previous nerfs, it's going to affect their special output just a little bit. I don't think this even remotely matters for Range Blaster, because most of the time you're picking the Wave Breaker one anyway at a top level, but sure. On the other changes, there are 2 more things worth noting. First off is the buff of this list, to Dreadringer. Apparently there's a bug with the weapon where anytime you jump with it, your range is slightly reduced as to what it should be. Despite playing Dread, I never really noticed this, but it's pretty obvious in the training range. If you stand and shoot at targets, you have a bit more range than when you jump and shoot at targets. This will be fixed. Dread is jumping most of the time that it's firing, which means that this is probably going to be a decent buff, honestly. Finally, there's a myriad of other changes that aren't worth going over, but there's one thing that's kind of interesting to list. The XP requirement to freshness levels was changed from 10,000 to 5,000, and they specify this is to make it easier to get Sheldon licenses. Why are they making it easier to get Sheldon licenses when they aren't adding any other weapons? I mean, this could just be to get them faster. But if you're on Copium for the 3rd kits, hey, here you go! Maybe they're giving us more licenses so we can get all the 3rd kits when they come out. Maybe it's real. I don't know. There is a very consistent theme for this whole patch. Hey, the most annoying attribute of this top tier weapon was toned back. And that's about it. Considering the next patch is just focused on adding Grand Festival stuff, it's pretty clear that there's not going to be any balance changes for that. But I think we will see another one at the usual time. On the off chance this is the last patch for the game, my god, I am infinitely disappointed at the lack of buffs, especially for new specials or weapons that never got the chance to truly thrive in this game. But I don't think that's the last one. Regardless, absolutely, this patch should have done some buffs to go alongside this. But I'm not upset with how they nerf things. I think it's clear the devs are very aware of what the meta is like right now, and probably like it a little bit themselves, considering they are being careful not to over-nerf any of the weapons as we transition into the endgame, which is a mistake they made in Splatoon 2, and are very clearly learning from, which is a great sign. That being said, again, I think some buffs are going to be necessary for this game to enter an even better spot at the end of its life. So I hope the next patches going forward are going to focus on that. But we're just going to have to wait and see. For now, I think it's going to be a little bit more enjoyable to play. I'll give it an overall positive rating. Thanks for watching.